you know my thoughts on Notre Dame. Last year when we were at the game,
remind us of what you said about Notre Dame.
my thought is Notre Dame are frauds.
Welcome back. It is the Rivalry Podcast. Jace, JP, Michigan, Ohio State, your garbage-free college football podcast, all about the Ohio State-Michigan college football rivalry. Sports talk without the tangents from River Radio Ministries and presented by Elevated Integrity Construction. The national championship preview episode.
Who's playing?
I don't remember, man. A couple teams that I could not care for. Yeah, this is about the worst possible. It's not the worst.
If you had to pick two teams that you would absolutely not want to see, these would be the ones that make it.
Ohio State and Michigan State. Michigan State would be far higher. Well, that's true. Michigan State. I don't think Michigan State has played for a national title in 60 years.
Yeah, they can't even spell national title at this point.
Well, they couldn't even make a bowl game, so it's fine. Anyway, at RivalPod on Instagram and Twitter, and if you're not watching on YouTube right now, get over there and subscribe. Let's spin the wheel route. Let's break a little bit of ice here. Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah, this could not have gone worse for me as a Michigan fan.
Time.
Yeah.
I'm loving life right now.
We've got so much to talk about here. About
overall
Texas.
Thoughts on the 12-team playoff after year one.
So is this like how you would, because you wrote these questions, like, is this how you would rearrange?
No. So like, I think the biggest thing that made me think of this question was I was seeing a lot of talk, mostly from the Michigan fan base, that talked specifically about how in years past, this Ohio State team would have missed out on the playoffs overall because it would have just been 4 teams.
I see what you're saying.
So after year one, it's kind of the overall grand scheme of things. So 12-team playoff. Were you okay with how they seeded things? Were you okay with it being a total of 12 teams? Would you like to? It's kind of overall, but that's what kind of inspired this question was. In years past, a team like Ohio State wouldn't have even made it, and now we're looking at them being in the championship game with a chance to win it all.
Yeah, I mean, I won't belabor some of the things we've said in past episodes. Like, there's so much that could be said about. I think we both agree, like, there's no reason to have 12 teams in this playoff. I think that's pretty clear.
Or it just needs drastically reseeded.
I just don't. I think both. I don't think you need 12 teams in this thing. I think you could. Frankly, I think 4 was fine. I think you could go to 6 or 8. I would still be okay with it. So I would shrink the number of teams back down to no more than 8. Could even go back down to 4, to be honest with you. Reseeding, if you are going to have more than 4 teams, absolutely has to happen. Ohio State deserved every bit of what they got against Oregon in that blowout win, but Oregon also should not have ended up having to play Ohio State. Now, the way it ended up shaking out was actually the 1 versus the 8. So I guess, in that scenario it was fine, but the potentials there just didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mostly agree with what you're saying. I think for me, I don't mind the 12-team playoff. I do think there are other teams, like you're going to have in that situation teams like a Boise or an SMU that I don't think are going to be able to match up with some of these bigger schools, but I think it'll make it exciting when they do pull off an inevitable upset at some point. So I'm fine with it. What I think the biggest problem is a situation like in Oregon. You go undefeated, you win your conference, and then you get a bye week, and then you end up playing an Ohio State, but you don't even get to play them at home. So, like, in that sense,
as amazing as the Rose Bowl is, like, it's a neutral site.
It's a neutral site. And so what's the real reward for that? So in my mind, it's a simple fix. You go through, you keep it to 12 teams. You figure out how you're going to do the seeding a little bit different. Yeah. But the first 2 rounds, in my opinion, need to be home games for the higher seed.
I would like that.
And I think that gives it a little bit more of a reward because you get the bye, you allow your students and that fan base to go and represent your school, give you that little bit of extra home field advantage. That makes it worth it. But I understand the point of view if you're an Oregon Duck, if you're a Texas fan, if you're not Texas, if you're a Georgia fan, you're XYZ, a top 4 team to get that bye week, and then you got to go play on a neutral site.
Yeah.
That doesn't really make sense to me, but I kind of hate the excuse of like, well, but then Oregon had to play an Ohio State. Well, they were going to eventually have to anyways. Yeah. And I think the argument is, and this is going to sound crazy homer, right? But look at who Ohio State's had to play to get to where they're at.
No, I mean, no slouch. That was the gauntlet.
And I think at the end of the day, the team that deserves to win the Natty is the team that's going to have to beat the tougher teams. Yeah. And so
what you could do then, and again, we won't belabor, but like, I think what you could do then is you could cut out seeds 9 through 12 just have 8 teams
I
and
think
basically
eight's as low as I would
bump
go.
everything back up so that that December 21st game or 20th or 21st is not, well, it's the opening round while 4 teams have it's you're playing top 4 seeds, get the bottom 4 seeds on campus, and then you can move into semis at a neutral site and all that stuff.
And I think 8 is as low as I would go because I understand what people are saying about, well, this OSU team wouldn't have even made the playoffs had it been in years past. But I think for me, at the end of the day, I want to see the best of the best. And while Ohio State walked into the playoffs with 2 losses on their schedule, I think it's pretty clear as day this is one of the best teams in the nation. And so, to me, excluding that almost takes away from. So you want to watch a TCU Georgia again because you're gonna let like an SMU or a team like that go in undefeated because XYZ team had 1 or 2 losses that kept them out. To me, that doesn't make sense. I want to see the best of the best go against the best of the best.
The only thing that I struggle with there, because we're in 95% agreement here. The only thing that I don't love about it is it does take something away from. So I look at next year. Ohio State, Texas opens up the season.
Mm-hmm.
A loss in August, because it is August 30th, a loss in August, September against quality opponents like that, it takes a little bit. It takes a little bit of the luster off that game because the loser, it's not going to affect them. They will drop a couple spots, and by the time you get to November, it's not right, but everyone will look back at September and go, well, that doesn't matter. They lost to a really good team. It takes stuff away from that, where when you could afford to maybe drop a game, that game becomes a lot bigger deal when it's only 4 teams getting in. You know what I mean?
Kind of, but like I think even then it still has like we almost saw it this year. I mean, Ohio State had 2 losses and they were the 8th seed. And so, I mean, they were right on the verge. I think everybody knew based off how conference championship games ended up going that they were still going to make it, but it was a question of where. I saw some people had them all the way down to a 10 in the college football playoffs. So, I mean,
but that goes back to should a team that loses, I mean, they didn't end up getting in, but like, should a team like Alabama with 3 losses even be remotely part of the conversation? Obviously, we said no, but the national media said, yeah, well let's see what happens. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the sort of thing that, again, there's 1,000 things to be fixed. Will they be fixed between now and next year? I don't know. I don't know.
Probably not.
And Ross Bjork, the AD at Ohio State, was talking about that, I think even before the Tennessee game, saying, hey, there's a number of things we'd like to see changed, but kind of referenced, I don't know that we'll see it in 25, but certainly moving forward from there.
And you heard a couple of coaches. I know Nick Saban was one of them this weekend where they were talking about Ohio State specifically and how drastically different they look from the end of November until now. And he even said, you know, sometimes those losses are what helps grow these teams. And sometimes you need to allow a team to have something like that on their record and still get a chance to come in. And I think Ohio State has proven that this year, that they're one of, if not the best team in college football.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt.
Especially in the college football playoffs. It's not even been really close.
One of the things that I have really enjoyed as I've suffered through watching Ohio State win postseason games is literally every single like post-game interview or analysis continues to mention the loss to Michigan. Like Ryan Day standing there like after winning the comp, well, he's head to the national title, and they're asking him, hey, how did this team bounce back after the Michigan loss? And I'm sitting on the couch going, after the what? After
but
the
you know what?
Though?
So I got into
conversations. So that's kind of fun. I enjoy that.
Well,
that's at least helping me.
I got into a conversation on Facebook with a Michigan fan about this, and we were just kind of talking about whether or not stuff like this takes away. Like, does Ohio State, and this is a wheel route we didn't get to, but does Ohio State winning a national championship nullify that? And he was saying like, he shared actually something from the Columbus Dispatch where it was a poll that they had said, would you rather win a national championship and lose to Michigan or beat Michigan and not win the Natty? And I forget the percentages, but it was like over 50% of the people said, yeah, I'd rather lose to Michigan and still win the Natty.
That's insane.
So we were going back and forth on it. And I shared my experience. I shared it here of walking out of the stadium after that game and hearing fans, and Jack Sawyer did it on the field where he said, your season's over, buddy. Your season's over. Ours is still going. And that mentality just kills me. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, does a national championship, should Ohio State win it, make it a successful season? Sure.
Absolutely it does.
That is goal 1A. goal 2A is beating that team. And this was a thing that we'll get into it as we recap the Ohio-Texas game. But that's one of those things where right now, you going into the playoffs, you looked at Ryan Day and all the narrative was his job is on the line. He can't get past that team up north. He can't win the big games. And I think some of that pressure with how he's performed, how he's had the team ready, has made that seat a little cooler. I think it's probably spared him from any of that narrative, even if he were to lose the championship. I think you'd hear a little bit of it, but it wouldn't be as loud as it was after the game. But you best believe if November comes around next season and he drops a 5th one in a row, it's going to be like this national championship didn't even happen.
It's a college football is a funny thing, and this rivalry in particular, and obviously like this is why we've been doing this for 6 full seasons now, is because there is something different about this rivalry. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I have maintained that I'm glad you asked this question, because one of the things that I have maintained, because I've been trying to think through, because I'm feeling as from the Michigan side, I'm feeling this big conflict here, understandably, of we beat Ohio State, but the Wicked Witch is not dead. In fact, they're probably going to go win a national title. So how do you process that? And so one of the things that I will maintain, and I will not entertain any other options here, is that if you are a Michigan fan, I'm not talking about the players, the coaches, I'm talking about the fan base. Mm-hmm. If you are a Michigan fan saying that Ohio State winning a national title doesn't matter because we beat you, you're either a fool or a liar. Like, I just don't. I'm watching this. When those playoff seedings come out, Michigan's not in that. When those playoff seedings come out, I'm going, yes, this is the gauntlet I want Ohio State to have to walk through. And every single game, I am pacing back and forth, cheering on Texas or cheering on Oregon or, God help me as a Michigan fan, cheering on Notre Dame. Why?
That.
Because of course it matters. It's the greatest rivalry in sports. Yeah. I don't want you to come anywhere close to this.
There's a reason that I bought a Washington Husky shirt that is rotted in my closet since last year. Because biggest Husky fan in the world last year.
So that's a big part of it. And on the flip side, and obviously like this podcast, even though we're credentialed with Michigan and Ohio State, we are based in Columbus. And so I see a lot more of this. I see Ohio State fans, any Ohio State fan who says, well, the loss to Michigan doesn't matter anymore because we're going to go win it all, is either a fool or a liar.
Sickens me.
Like you're either lying to me, you're lying to yourself, or you're just dumb. I'm sorry. Garbage-free college football podcast, but you dumb. You really dumb for real.
The opinion that a Michigan loss doesn't matter is garbage.
Like the polling is interesting. Like at the end of the day, like I would rather beat Ohio State than win a national title. It's not all that close. Fun fact, you can do both. But the idea that Ohio State winning doesn't matter because we beat you already is foolishness. The idea that Ohio State winning means, the Michigan loss doesn't matter anymore is foolishness. Like
100%.
You have to be able to hold both of these things. And this is what I said, and I'm passionate about this because this is what I said last episode too, of I completely lost my train of thought here. Oh, I was so passionate. I lost my train of thought.
I love it. Wow.
The idea that it'll come back to me at some point.
But I see what you're saying, and I agree with it. The second that you start to diminish what this game means, to me, it shows your true colors as a fan. And I don't care. I'll call you a fake fan because to me, that's what you are. Anybody that really, truly roots for for this team, whether you're a Michigan fan, whether you're an Ohio State fan, the second that you utter that phrase, well, that loss doesn't matter. I don't really need to beat that team because a natty is what really counts.
Yeah,
don't put on the scarlet and gray. Don't do it. I don't want to associate. It's like I kept seeing a clip go around. I forget where it was even from, but there was a clip going around of a guy dressed in his Buckeye gear, and it was right before the end of the first half against Texas when Travion ripped off the 75-yard run, and he had like some bet or something on it. And ended up losing the bet because Travion did that. And instead of celebrating Travion going and retaking the lead, he's putting his jersey over his head and all that. Buffoon is exactly what that is. I was so mad. I hate that kind of a fan. It's just not for me.
And I don't think that it's legitimate. Like I really like if you have to continue to reemphasize, well, I don't care. I don't care that we lost to Michigan. We won the whole, I don't care. I really don't care. The lady doth protest too much, methinks. And the same, by the way, 100%. The same on the Michigan fan base where it's going, well, I don't care that you won the whole thing because we beat you. It's like, that's part of it. Yeah. But also, yeah, of course you care. Mm-hmm. This is the greatest rivalry in sports. Of course you care.
And that's
of
what
course
makes
it matters.
So fun to cover. And that's what makes college football, in my opinion, the best sport to follow. And is because of the passion, because of the pageantry, because of the rivals that you go into. It's supposed to feel like this. It's supposed to be heated. It's supposed to be something that ruins your entire weekend. That's why sports are fun. And if you're young, you just shouldn't watch them.
It's one of those things too, where, it's why do you think that last year, after Michigan won the national title, every Ohio State fan made it their life's goal to put an asterisk on anything they could find? Because it's hard to process your rival winning the whole thing. It's incredibly difficult. Why do you think every Michigan fan right now is going, hey, remember when we beat you? Because it matters, sure, but also because it's hard to process your rival winning the whole thing. That's part of what makes this so good. And in the new world of, and this is what we were talking about, in the new world of college football, where in years prior, Michigan has ended Ohio State's season effectively. In 2 out of the last 3 years, not leading into this year. I mean, if you had a shortened playoff, sure, Michigan would have ended Ohio State's season again. You don't, though. And that's going to be a weird thing to process. It does not, and it cannot make the game matter any less.
100%.
And if you are insisting that it does, you probably were on the losing end of that game.
100%. Well,
let's talk Texas.
Yeah, let's start going into Ohio State, Texas. Man, what a game from start to finish. I think there's a lot of takeaways that you can go through from this, but there are some key ones that I wanted to talk about. I talked about this, I forget when. It might have been right before the Tennessee game in one of our blogs. You can check all of our blogs out at rivalpod.com.
Ooh, good,
shameless
good plug, yeah.
But specifically, if you go and read mine, I want to say it was right before the Tennessee game. I talked about the feeling after the UM game and how Ryan Day and this team felt like they were at a crossroads.
Yeah.
They had two choices, and it was a similar path to what Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines had back in like 2020 or something when they were, I forget what their record was. It was bad.
The COVID year?
Yeah, the COVID
like
year was bad.
2-5 or something.
And the fan base was right there on the verge of, okay, well, Harbaugh's tenure here might have to be done. Yeah. And then you see what ended up happening. They got the boat sailing the right direction, obviously had the incredible run that they did, and nobody cares about that year anymore because of what he accomplished. Yeah. That felt very similar to where Ryan Day was at with this team. The thing that really impressed me and I think he's shown it so far in these playoffs, that he's heading in the right direction. Because Tennessee, I could have seen them squeaking by. But I'll be honest, and I think I still had them beating Oregon, but there was a really solid part of me that thought this could be the end here. Do they have the mental toughness? This was a team that beat them before, that's got the talent to compete with them. They've shown it. Can they go through and continue to build off of that last performance? And we saw what happened. Then I look at it and I go, Texas is a tough team. Texas has a solid defense. They got a really strong defensive line. Are they going to be able to replicate those two performances like they did in rounds 1 and round 2? And while they didn't necessarily replicate that, I think there are things that made me feel like they turned a corner. And I had this moment of clarity later on in the game. Texas tied the game at 14. And in that moment, I thought, this is where you're really going to see, and I think I even tweeted it out, you want to prove that you're a tough team, here's where you show it. And in years past, and I think you would agree with this too, in years past, when that game goes 14-14, all the momentum was on Texas's side.
You texted me the word ball game, so yeah,
you know where I was mentally.
You and I are both very nervous, anxious watchers of our teams.
Yeah. Me, my living room, pacing rapidly, cold sweats, not a fun time.
Was Roscoe there, your doggo?
He actually left the other room and went and hung out with my wife because it was very tense. In that moment, though, in the back of my mind, because of past games, I thought, this team, I'm not sold yet, has a mentality to overcome this. Mm-hmm. They had been starting to get slowed down on offense. Texas's defense had kind of settled in and started moving. Quinn Ewers was making plays. You know, when you watch games, and I think we were talking about this, and there are handfuls of moments where it just feels like that team is destined to pull it out. Yeah. When on the one kick return, they fumbled it and the ball went right back to them. Yeah. And then the play with Quinn Ewers where he's getting tackled to the ground. It looks like it's going to be a sack on a crucial third down. And he just scoops it. And I mean, by inches, he wasn't down. And they end up pulling off a very long third down and converting it. Yep. Moments like that, especially with how Ohio State's offense was moving the ball, in my mind, I thought Ohio State's back is against the wall. can they overcome this? And while they didn't do it right away, they immediately, like 2 drives later, I want to say, went on a 13-play, 88-yard, almost 8 minutes off the clock drive.
The Michigan drive.
And I was going to say it, and I knew it was going to hurt you. I knew it was going to hurt you.
No, but that's been Michigan's bread and butter, right?
A drive killer. And then you see the other thing that's been impressive is immediately you see Texas start driving down the field, and they have a mental error. You can debate this with a brick wall because it's a mute point to me. But the gunner helm gets the thing and points at it.
Good Lord.
You know me as a person, and I've said it many times. I have zero issue with taunting.
Yeah.
I'm here for it. Do I think Gunnar Helm should have absolutely done that? Yes, he sunned Caleb Downs in that moment. I knew the second he did that was a penalty. And
That's terrible.
It's sure, but by the rule book, you knew the second he did that he was going to get flagged.
It was. I don't know if I don't remember. I blacked out after part of this game because I was just like, of all people, Jack Sawyer's going to run this back. But it reminded. So I don't remember if I tweeted this out, but it reminded me of that critical penalty that Penn State had.
Yeah.
Where it was like stepped over a guy. It was like, and it wasn't aggressive, but it was like by the strict letter of the law, sure. But you never see that call.
To me,
it reminded me of the same thing.
Because that felt a little different because to me, the Penn State thing, like he walked over him, but this was like he pointed at him,
and it ended up not mattering because they
you're first, the ball don't lie.
Okay,
but here's the bigger point leading on to that same drive they go down, and I go, all right, you're letting them drive right down the field. They're going to be in a position if they score and tie it up. Do you have enough left in the tank to go pull off another drive?
I don't think they did.
The way that Texas's defense had been playing, I'm not 100% sold. The way they locked up Jeremiah Smith, the way that they'd been able to get pressure on Howard,
especially with the way that Ohio State had just gone on that drive, and then Texas, who has struggled to move the actually both offenses kind of struggled to move the football for huge chunks of that game, just boop 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 down to the one, and I'm going. I would agree. Like if they score here, I don't have much confidence in that Ohio State resilience.
But here's the thing that I think has kind of been overlooked.
They got to score.
Yeah, they've got to score. And here's the thing. You've seen it all season long with Ohio State's defense. There's been 4 different occasions. Nebraska up 14-9. It's 1st and goal. No points allowed.
Yep.
Penn State twice in one game. 1st and goal. Once before the half, which ended in an interception by Davison Igbinosun. And then at the very, very end of the game when they stuffed them, and then ended up getting the Caleb Downs incomplete pass to seal it. 0 points allowed. Then Texas, 1st and goal from the 1. 0 points allowed.
Yep.
7 points earned because Jack Sawyer ran it back like the man that he is.
Yeah.
Though that whole mentality, and Ohio State's had this all season long, of bend, don't break. And they even had it, I would say, in the Michigan game. Had the offense,
well, I was gonna say,
the offense been
you
there.
had you could throw in the goal line stand where Sawyer picked it off, except he can't. But
I mean, it counts. But yes,
it felt like, and again, this is where I can be objective enough as a college football fan and analyst to go. It felt like Ohio State's season in that respect, in a big moment in that game, had to come down to some sort of, not like Texas was going to go win the game if they scored right there necessarily. But it felt like this season had to be determined by a goal line stand. Just the way, this is how sports work. Like sports are weird like this, where you do have the Nebraska and the Penn State and the Michigan even and the Texas, despite the way Michigan worked out. It felt like Ohio State's going to have to pull off another one, and they did. The giant baffling thing is going, that's going to be debated in Austin for centuries. Is the play call on 2nd and goal? There is no reason, and this is not second guess. I don't know if you remember this line from the old college football game, the old NCAA, where Kirk will, you like onside kick when you're up or something, and Kirk will come on and go, "I'm not second guessing, I'm first guessing." That's me watching that play, going, "Did you not have you not watched the Penn State game?" Give your best players just go.
Well, and
where's Arch Manning? Where quarterback Quinn Ewers is not a small man. Give it to Gunnar Helm. There are so many better first guess options than that play, because obviously not rocket science. What that play does is it sets you up now where now you have to do something a little more creative. You have to kind of throw the ball now. It is nonsensical. It was compared to somebody, not me, but it's accurate. Somebody compared it to the Seattle Seahawks. Instead of handing to Marshawn Lynch, let me throw the ball. it's not quite that bad, but it's at that level. It's right there.
Because I
Just
don't understand.
Give someone the ball.
At that point, you played into the strength of the Ohio State defense,
Yes.
where you know the speed they have. You know that you have Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs way back there with the speed and the ability. I mean, those guys have been the anchor of that secondary.
Well, and just the
season
just
long.
the pass rush, and Quinn Ewers has zero pocket
The
presence.
second, when it was second down and they made that play, and Ohio State obviously got the tackle for loss, that's when I kind of breathed a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
Because I thought, okay, it's 2nd and 1 from the 1. I feel like they're going to punch it in.
Yeah. Well, they should have.
And they should have. And I think a lot of teams probably would have. Although I know Penn State tried a handful of times and didn't.
Well, Penn State also insisted on not giving the ball to their best players.
That's fair.
Which
That's
again is part of the issue here that, you know, and I didn't watch admittedly, I didn't watch the Texas post-game conference because I just didn't care that much. But like I hope somebody has asked Sark, and I'm sure they have, and I'm sure they will. What is the thought? This is where you kind of sit down, like as a parent sometimes, and you just go, all right, not mad, I'm disappointed. Help me to understand X, Y, Z. Because Sark, help me to understand why you thought that was the play call. And that's not.
I loved it. I thought it was the best call.
That's not to take anything away from the Ohio State defense either. The Ohio State defense made that play.
And it's not a guarantee.
But it made no sense. In the moment, when you saw them pitch it out, you're going, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. What are they doing?
Ohio State had a similar play. I don't remember where it was in the game, but it was like a 3rd and 1, and they did a toss. And they ended up, and it was to Judkins, and they ended up not getting it. And I'm sitting there, and I tweeted it out at Rival Pod. I'm sitting there going, what are you doing? What are you doing?
It's, you know, you don't have to watch a ton of football. We do anyway, but like, you don't have to go sometimes. And I we'll back up a half a step. I get that running the ball, just run up that is not always the easiest thing in the world. I get that. Understand it. But sometimes these coaches get too creative for their own good. We've seen it with, we've saw it with the toss play on 3rd down. We saw it with the second and goal from the 1. Let's toss it to the outside. Michigan did this against TCU, right? The Joe Moore award-winning offensive line in 2022 in the Fiesta Bowl, and we're going to try and run the Philly special. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Or even the Notre Dame game last year in South Bend, 4th and 2. I think it was 4th and 1, and Ryan Day calls a jet sweep with Emeka Egbuka.
Yeah.
Why? There's coaches get too creative for their own good sometimes. Sometimes the simplest thing is the best thing. Regardless, if you're an Ohio State fan, I mean, as poetic as it comes for Jack Sawyer to be the guy.
What a moment.
By the way, did you know that he and Quinn Ewers were roommates?
I did, actually.
Has anyone... Can I just say, and then I want your thoughts on the Jack Sawyer thing. Listen, they tried so hard to make the Quinn Ewers was at Ohio State thing a storyline.
Yeah.
Quit. Like, technically, yes, he was at Ohio State. Technically, yes, he and Jack Sawyer were roommates. This is not a storyline. This is not... Hey, this isn't Kyle McCord transferred to Syracuse and then they meet in the playoff semifinals.
Could you imagine?
No, I can't. Like this is this is not that. Okay, like this is just not that. This isn't Will Howard now playing against Kansas State in the playoffs.
Yeah,
this is a guy who was there, made $1 million and went home.
It's worth mentioning because obviously it's a thing that happened.
But trying to drive this up is like this is against his former team. Like, I mean.
He doesn't know half of the guys on that team anymore.
Technically, yeah, sure. And then I don't know if this is true or not, but somebody had posted online that I don't know if this was a joke or not. Something about Riley Leonard and Will Howard being like roommates at some Manning passing something or other.
I don't know. I haven't seen that.
I don't know. It might have been a joke. Either way,
Riley Leonard should go back there.
Maybe he
clearly
could.
It didn't work.
He could. Anyway, that
man.
might have just been sarcasm on the internet that I missed. But regardless, it wasn't a storyline. Stop trying to make it one.
No.
But how did you feel about Jack?
Yeah, I think, and I've been honest about Jack Sawyer his entire time. I think he's crazy talented, but I've talked a handful of times about him and JTT specifically. What I feel like in years past, at least in that position as being an edge defender, we've been blessed and spoiled with riches. From the Bosa twins to Chase Young, so on and so forth. We've had talent there that has been among the best in the nation. Yeah. And I felt like Jack Sawyer and JTT were incredibly talented individuals, but I just feel like they weren't at that level yet.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, the famous, JTT disappears till the Penn State game.
100%.
There's a reason why that was a meme or
and I
whatever.
think Jack Sawyer and him both have had phenomenal seasons this year all around. I think they've shown up in a handful of the bigger games, but they just hadn't had their Ohio State moment. You know, you think back, I always think back to Joey Bosa pummeling through the running back at Penn State and making his own player sack Christian Hackenberg, or was it McSorley? They looked the same, so who cares?
Every Penn State quarterback is the same.
They're just rotating. I'm sure that that's just like a clone factory.
I'm not convinced Sean Clifford's not still there, to be honest with you.
He just has been changing his name. It's like the one Benchwarmers movie where they bring the guy in and it's like a little kid league and he holds up the ID in crayon that says I am 12, but it's like that. It's Christian Hackenberg showing up to new student enrollment.
We call that
in
the Michigan world, we call that the JT Barrett eligibility.
1,000,000%. It's the same thing. Yeah. It's the Jack Tuttle rule.
There it is.
But you go in and I'm looking at this and I'm going, what a deserving moment. And I saw this with Travion Henderson, and I think it's kind of true with Jack. And I would still stand by this. There are some Buckeye fans that loved Jack for what he did after the Michigan game, and I will never be on that side. I just won't. I think that was an ugly stain on his career, while others might say that's what I'm going to stand by, and they'll have photos in their Ohio State sports lounge or whatever of that.
I hope if they do, they've got the scoreboard in the background. Because
I will never be on that side. I thought there are significantly better ways to handle that. But I was grateful for him to be able to get that moment. Being a kid from Pickerington, always wanted to be a Buckeye. It felt poetic for him to be able to cap it off. He had a heck of a game anyways. He's had a heck of a year. He's had a heck of a playoff. For him to be able to have that moment has enshrined him in Buckeye lore forever. That play, and I saw people comparing that play to the 85 yards down the heart of the South, Ezekiel Elliott, Alabama run. It wasn't quite there for me. But it was, in the moment, that is something that years and years and years from now, people will talk about the Jack Sawyer scoop and score.
Well, it's similar to, when Michigan played Alabama in the road, to give myself a little bit of breathing room here so I don't vomit with all this talk about Ohio State. It reminded me of like when Michigan came back to beat Alabama in last year's semifinal in the Rose Bowl. Mm-hmm. And, Blake Corum had the overtime run where he cuts by a couple guys, makes Caleb Downs look like a fool, spins past another guy and scores. And I had said immediately, like, this is not rocket science, but it was one of those moments where you go, kind of like the Sawyer thing, where you go, if this game ends the way that I think it's going to, and really it probably takes the season ending the way that you need it to if you're a fan, you just watched something that is going to be replayed again and again and again and again, like. Because it's like for Michigan, the last title was in 97, right? Ohio State's not had to wait quite that long, but it's been a bit since you had that national champion type moment where you go, okay, I've seen from years past, like, these older replays of like, this big run, the Desmond Howard punt return, Charles Woodson, whatever, Tim Biakabatu. Okay. And then you watch it going, that's it. If they win this, that's it. The other one for me, just because like a little bit of nostalgia here, like when Michigan beat Ohio State in 21, there was this image of, the snow's falling, the crowd's all around Jim, and Jim's kind of holding his folder of playbook stuff like up over his head, like with the crowd around him. He's trying to like walk through. There's a still image of that immediately when I saw it live, I went, that's the shot. Mm-hmm. That's the shot when they talk about Harbaugh's legacy at Michigan and the net and whatever else. That's the shot they're going to use. Same type of thing here for and Henderson. Although that was kind of just a weird play, but the Jack Sawyer one in particular, if Ohio State wins the whole thing, which I think they will,
we'll get to that.
If you're a Buckeye, like that's the one that you go, hey, that's the shot. Mm-hmm. That's the one.
100%. And I think to me, you have two choices. You can either continue on with the Ezekiel Elliott route where you go on to win the whole thing, or it's going to be similar to, I want to say it was Chris Olave and Justin Fields, where I see this play all the time against Clemson, where it's just an absolute dime from Justin Fields, and people go to that play because it sent them, obviously, to the championship game against Alabama where they got smoked. Yeah. But you have your choice now, Jack. Yep. You guys can either go and relive what they went through with Zeke, and you can go handle business against Notre Dame and win the whole thing, or that play is going to be kind of in that Chris Olave field where it's a great play. People will always talk about it, but what did you do after? Yeah, the late, great Kobe Bryant said, job's not finished. Mm-hmm. Right? Maybe you feel a little bit like Frames Janklin in Penn State. That's it.
You know what you're doing isn't working, and you need to transfer in some help, maybe in the form of a better quarterback or a wide receiver. Thankfully, our friends at Elevate Integrity Construction are the portal to a successful project. Aaron and his team have been doing this a long time. If you've got a church, home, or business build, go with the folks who have integrity in their name. You're going to be wowed at the finished product. It is elevatedintegrity.com. And you can tell that we've been doing these sponsors for a bit this year because I'm doing this without my notes today.
And the James Franklin one has been one
that's been a pretty good one.
It's been a pretty reliable source as of late.
We are also here at the Rivalry, really proud to be part of the Varsity Network this season. Powered by Learfield, a must-have for every college football fan. You can find live college football games, podcasts just like this one. Just search for your school or search for the Rivalry podcast in the Varsity Network app, free to download in the App Store and Google Play Store. The last thing we want to mention is that your support of the Rivalry podcast goes a whole long way. Currently waiting for approval for the national title game for this man right here, for JP. Send him down to Atlanta.
One more time.
I will not say it again.
I'll listen to it later. It's fine.
And whether your support helps specifically with things like hotels and travel logistics, whether it helps with marketing for next season, for other travel opportunities for the 25-26 season, your support matters. It's a small budget podcast. Would you consider either picking up your own t-shirt? If you're watching on YouTube right now, got Michigan and Ohio State versions of these t-shirts, or you can do the buy me a coffee route, which is throwing however much you want, just saying, hey, appreciate you guys. Keep up the good work. That means the world. So thank you for considering doing that. Click the support tab at rivalpod.com. Let's talk about one of the worst things that could possibly happen, which is Ohio State playing Notre Dame in a national championship game. There's 1,000 different places you could start with this. Let me just give you right off the bat my biggest concern with this game. Because Ohio State opened as 9.5 point favorites. I don't know if the line has moved already.
No, it's still 9.5.
The biggest concern here, and again, this is not an X's and O's podcast. There are other better podcasts for that. So I'm using some assistance here a little bit, but Notre Dame plays pretty strictly man coverage, and they're very, very good at playing man coverage. The problem is Ohio State excels when you play man coverage. Jeremiah Smith with hey, letting you know now, if you play man, we're going to take a shot. Oregon played man, and well, you saw what happened. I believe Tennessee does as well, and you saw what happened. Caveat there, I will say after the Rose Bowl game when they asked, hey, can anybody guard you? And he said no. Apparently they can, because he had one catch for 3 yards.
One person can't guard him, but when you literally crowd 3 people around, I mean, that was Texas's game plan was.
One catch for 3 yards is one catch for 3 yards. But again, for Ohio State's credit, they got the job done, but maybe this is again where I talked last week about, hey, be careful of the rat poison, maybe running your mouth a little too much before you get the job done. That's a good example right there. But Notre Dame insists on playing man coverage, which is going to be a problem because the teams that have had success at shutting down this Ohio State offense, at least relatively speaking, Texas did a really good job of it. I know, again, you could look at the box score if you watched the game.
Yeah, for sure.
Ohio State scored on their first drive of the game, their last drive of the game, and the last drive of the half on a kind of weird screenplay, right? Those are still points. Texas did a really good job of shutting down that offense.
And there were,
and Michigan.
Yes
Michigan would be the other one, though, is to my point, is Texas took a page out of the Wink Martindale playbook and said, okay, and guess what? Those two systems worked against Ohio State. Notre Dame doesn't play that way, and it makes me really concerned about their ability to shut down Jeremiah Smith, Igbuka, and man coverage one-on-one. I think Ohio State out-talents you. It's a good defense, but I think Ohio State's more talented, and that's a concern if I'm Notre Dame.
I agree with you to an extent on your first point as far as Texas defense and shutting down the Buckeye offense. I think they did towards the second half, but there were a handful of drives, and I didn't write all of them out specifically, but if you watch the game, you'll know because you were sitting there watching it. There were a handful of drives where Ohio State just killed themselves a couple of times, where they continually found themselves in 2nd and 20, 2nd and 25, long third downs after a penalty. I mean, you had the knucklehead play by Travion early where they were moving the ball. Even on that run, I think he picked up a first down, and then he does an uncharacteristic play, gets unsportsmanlike penalty. I loved his response after the game to it.
Yeah, it was good.
Where he basically said, it's not like me. I went down, I had a conversation with God and asked for his forgiveness.
And he said no.
And
I'm kidding. This is from a ministry. I'm kidding.
To rip off a 75-yard run to end the half, a catch. But
do you think Riley Leonard could maybe commit a penalty and ask for forgiveness and rip off some touchdown plays?
But I think to your point, Texas's defense did get it together, and they were definitely a force, at least in the second half. But I think there were a lot of times looking back. I mean, Ohio State almost had 100 yards penalty, 100 penalty yards in that game. They were making a lot of mistakes. And some of it was Tennessee forced. Some of those holding calls was because they were getting by the Ohio State linemen.
Yeah.
So that's giving credit to them, but it's still Ohio State. There were at least 2 or 3 drives where they were kind of moving the ball. Then they'd have a 10-yard penalty for something happen, and it would just kill all the momentum that was going on. But yeah, I think when you hit the nail on the head with Notre Dame playing man defense, I just think if you're going to go in single coverage like that, the Ohio State receivers, as you saw against Texas, they decided their game plan was going to be, we're going to let Jeremiah Smith be a non-factor. We're going to have a huddle around him at all times. He's not going to get over the top. You saw numerous times he would beat the first man, but there was a safety help.
It was brilliant.
Where there was a guy covering the middle. There was one play specifically where he was on the far right side of the field, and they showed the pre-snap, and he had a guy pressing him on man, but then he had a guy directly over him, and then he had a guy playing a little bit up to cover the middle of the field. So whatever way Jeremiah went, there was going to be help to shut that down. And you saw it. I mean, one catch for 3 yards. But I think it showed Ohio State's ability at wide receiver. You had guys like Carnell Tate. You had guys like G. Scott make some big catches. You had obviously Emeka Ibuka going out there and proving it. That's what's going to happen. And Ohio State showed their strength. I think for me, that's not even what really narrows this game down to me, because And I don't want to go back on what I said, because I still think this way. But if you've ever listened to this podcast for a second, you know my thoughts on Notre Dame. Last year when we were at the game,
remind us of what you said about Notre Dame.
My thought is Notre Dame are frauds. I think that they had a favorable schedule to get here, and I still stand by that. But I do have a newfound respect. And I think having respect is a little bit different than still believing that this is an elite level team. After beating,
this team is in the national championship.
Penn State was almost in the national championship.
And Penn State's a really good football team.
Penn State is a good team, but they're not an elite team.
What does Notre Dame have to do? Because you went real big on this last episode about Notre Dame are frauds. They don't deserve to be here. Notre Dame has done everything asked of them.
And I think my point is I want to see an elite level victory on your resume.
They beat A&M on the road.
Not an elite victory. They're
A&M was a game away from the SEC title.
They went 8-5,
and then they beat Georgia.
They went 8-5.
Georgia did not go 8-5. No, I'm talking
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M. Then they beat Georgia.
Georgia with a backup quarterback.
And then they beat Penn State.
They beat Georgia with a backup quarterback. Okay. Which is huge. It matters.
At some point, hold the Golden Dome to L and just take it.
I'll give you a slight. I would, but we've beat them the past 2 years. So
I think you've beat them every year since the 1930s, right?
So I'll give
not every year. I'll
lean a little bit more on Georgia being a key victory, although I would still say them not having Carson Beck was a huge factor, and I don't think you could argue that it wasn't.
No, it's a factor. They would have beat him anyway.
I don't think they would have. And you'll never know.
Miami Hurricane Carson Beck?
Yeah, you'll never know. I saw that he had they were trying to speculate like he might go to Ohio State. No, he wasn't.
He was never, and he wasn't going to the NFL either.
Everybody knew where he was going. Even in his the announcement for him transferring, it was green with a little duck on the bottom or whatever. That to me is, you could say whatever. I think Carson Beck playing in that game, they probably don't win. Them beating Indiana 27-17 after what I saw Ohio State do to Indiana, and I think Indiana was a fraud, and I think everybody that watched the playoffs now can admit that. Indiana's not an impressive victory, but they only lost one game all season, and it was to Ohio State. So if you're looking at records, you're looking at that, and then people trying to point out Army and Navy as key wins. Nobody in their right mind has ever pointed out Army and Navy as being a key victory on your resume.
So, I don't care. What do you want? Who do you want them to beat?
Penn State started to sway.
Who do you want them to beat? They have beat every single team on the schedule minus NIU.
And I said it before. I mean, if they end up winning the Natty, I'll eat my words. But to me,
you won't though.
If they beat Ohio State,
if they won the national title, here's what Ohio State does. Here's what this fan base does. No one ever beats Ohio State. Ohio State just beats themselves.
Okay, don't rope me in that.
When have I ever done that? We didn't lose to Michigan. We beat ourselves. Well, Well, that wasn't you, but even during the Texas game, well, Texas isn't stopping. This was not you. This was someone else.
Here,
Texas didn't stop us. We're stopping ourselves.
My point. You're just saying Ohio State fans, and then you're going, but not you.
Well, yeah,
but not you. So that's what I'm saying. If Notre Dame comes out and beats Ohio State, I'll give them their credit. I will finally mark off. Okay, this is an elite level team. The Penn State, and we said this before we hit record, and this is where I'll I don't want to say it's backtracking, but it did give me, you earned my respect a little bit more. Penn State, time in and time out, is a tough team to play. Do I think Penn State is elite? I've said it numerous times. James Franklin cannot win big games. Drew Aller does not show up in big games. You could go all the way to last season. You could go all through this season. I've said it almost every time Penn State's name gets brought up. I do not have faith in those two players. And I would stand on that hill. And look what happened when they played Notre Dame. They were atrocious. Drew Aller was absolutely horrific to watch.
Very bad.
And so I don't think that point was proven to be false, you know? And so I'm looking at this and I'm going, Penn State's tough. That is a good victory to have on your resume. But also, I watch Penn State lose every big game they ever play. So how much weight am I really letting that carry?
It carried a lot of weight when you guys beat them earlier this season.
Without our starting offensive lineman, we had a brand new lineup going into the game.
Here's the good news. If you're Notre Dame,
and it was on the road.
If you're Notre Dame, here's the only good news for you. It's kind of the you ever watch Miracle with Herb Brooks?
No, what even is that?
The hockey,
okay,
USA,
yeah,
Russia,
Miracle,
where he's doing like the locker room speech, and it's the if we played them 10 times, they might win 9, but it's basically like we gotta win 1.
yeah.
That's.
I'm more familiar with the Little Giants terminology, but
Lord, you're killing me, Smalls. Is that's that
how
one?
Dare
right?
you
Okay.
disrespect the Little Giants?
I have seen no movies. Clearly
factual.
I've seen that one.
Yeah,
okay.
Except for Miracles, the one movie, and probably some weird Veggie Tales thrown in there.
Okay, Madame Blueberry in theaters absolutely slapped. Thank you. But if you're Notre Dame, truly though, you need to win one game.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're Notre Dame, if I'm Marcus Freeman, I am one. You're obviously hyping your team up, but I'm pointing at the Michigan game. That is the game I'm pointing to. Going, listen. There's a 18.5, 20-point spread that Ohio State lost just 6 weeks ago at home. This is not an invincible team.
But here's my point. And I don't think you can combat it because you said it. You said it earlier in this podcast where you're talking about Ohio State and you're automatically saying who's most likely going to win the championship.
Oh yeah, that's not part of the. That's not a
question. But that's what I'm saying. If Notre Dame is elite, if I'm supposed to take them serious, why is the conversation amongst everybody? The line is 9.5 point favorites. I'm not the only person sitting here saying.
The question isn't is Notre Dame elite. The question is, are they frauds? And the answer is absolutely not.
I guess it determines. It depends on what you mean by frauds.
What do you mean by frauds?
Do I think that Notre Dame is a top 2 team in the nation? No. Do I think that they're top 5? I could maybe be swayed to top 5.
A top 5 team in the country. There's 157 teams. That's not a fraud.
But I'm saying fraudulent as did they deserve to be? At the beginning of the season, would you have picked them to be in a national championship? And if you were trying to think, we talked about it pre-recording, Texas and Ohio State, and I think everybody in the nation said, Oregon, Ohio State's the national championship.
Yeah.
Then after that happened, it was Ohio State and Texas is the national championship game. Nobody was looking at that bracket at all. Even before the playoffs officially started, people were looking at that Ohio State section of the bracket and saying whoever comes out of there is the national champion.
For sure. That has nothing to do with Notre Dame being a fraud or not.
Because I think you saw the best teams play against the best teams already.
I mean, yeah, there's no question that side of the bracket was more difficult, but that has no bearing on whether or not Notre Dame is a fraudulent team or not. They absolutely deserve to be there. They are also going to be 10-point underdogs because Ohio State, talent to talent, is a better football team. Ohio State is also a better football team than just about everybody right now.
To me, means you're a fraud because you don't belong to be in the championship. You don't belong in the championship.
Oh my gosh, that makes no sense.
You just
okay,
don't.
So we're not getting anywhere here. So let's jump right to score stuff. I mean, We've mentioned the strength of Notre Dame is their defense. However, the scheme for Notre Dame's defense doesn't seem like it's going to line up well for Ohio State.
Yeah.
Or doesn't seem like it will line up well facing Ohio State. Is there let me ask this. What's the path to victory for Notre Dame? If you are the path to victory for Ohio State seems pretty clear. Mm-hmm. You keep doing what you're doing. The defense played very good football game. I thought the offense was good in spurts. I did not think they played fantastic. Frankly, I didn't think Will Howard played all that well.
I thought he was fine.
He
forced it to come out of the second half, but
yeah, there were a few when Texas got pressure. I guess, and maybe I'm answering my own question here. When Texas got pressure, just like when Michigan would get pressure, Will just kind of starts chucking stuff up. So I guess if you're Notre Dame, the hope is like you're gonna have to get home, or at least you're gonna have to create pressure and make him try to force stuff. I guess that's how I would answer that question. For you as the Buckeye, like if you're looking at the other side, what's the path to victory for Notre Dame here? How do they pull this off? Because again, for all the talk about fraud versus elite versus whatever, this is the matchup. It's a good football team, but they also look outmatched. How do they win?
Yeah, I think Notre Dame can pull this off if they control the ground game. And I didn't want to just limit that to running backs. I think you saw it against UM. I think you saw it against Texas. When Judkins and Henderson weren't effective, it slows down the Ohio State offense dramatically. I think Love and I think more specifically Leonard are going to have to make plays on the ground. I don't trust Riley Leonard throwing the ball whatsoever.
Nope.
I don't think he's going to outduel Will Howard in that sense. I don't think the receivers are going to do as well. But I think what scares me, and I use that loosely with Riley Leonard, is his mobility. I think Ohio State's proven, and I said this back when we played Nico in Tennessee, I thought his ability to run would be troublesome for the Buckeye defense, and I thought they did a great job of containing him. He had a handful of plays here and there, but overall wasn't really effective. I think you saw that against Penn State. You saw it against Georgia. His ability, especially the Georgia game, his ability to run on the ground, really help extend plays, escape the pressure. He's a bigger bodied guy.
And he's also a veteran too, where Nico,
he's a veteran.
You know, this is not taking anything from Ohio State, but Nico's a freshman, and also like that weather was absolutely effective. And also the other part of this is not just the weather, but the fact that Ohio State got up by so much so quickly. Completely threw the game plan out.
100%.
This, if Notre Dame can hang in there for even a quarter, that might look different with his running ability.
And so for me, it comes down to that. If Ohio State is losing the rushing battle, if they're allowing Leonard to make plays on the ground, it's gonna be a scary one.
Yeah.
I just don't see it happening. I picked out a stat, and I don't know how true this is for Notre Dame because I didn't look at it, but Ohio State all season long, there was one crucial thing. They've only given up more than 17 points twice all season. Both of which happened against, you guessed it, Oregon. Other than that, no other team has scored more than 17 points.
Because Michigan scored what, like 13?
13 points. I know you said that just to slight me. I hate you. I'm not ashamed.
I just need you to take the bait.
I am ashamed to say the score, but I will say it. I'll even tweet it. That was for you. I knew
Thank you
like
so
that.
much.
But Ohio State opponents, outside of 2 times, and it was against Oregon, have scored more than 17.
Yeah.
So if I'm really
I didn't realize that. Like, I knew that they were good. I didn't realize the stat.
If I'm just going down off one thing that I can trust, it's that defense. I'm not convinced in the offense for the Notre Dame. I like Love, but I think he already is given. I think Ohio State's played best when they've had a little bit of bulletin board material this playoff. And I know after they ended up beating Penn State, he came out and said, I want Ohio State. We want to play them. They beat us, and we should have beat them last year. And I don't think that's a crazy motivator, but you already see the newspaper clippings from last year when we played at Notre Dame with Marcus Freeman and his letter to the Notre Dame faithful, where he comes out and talks about him coming down when he was in college. He obviously played for the Buckeyes, coming down to his decision between Notre Dame and Ohio State, and he chose the Buckeyes for his playing career. At the end of his letter for him becoming head coach at Notre Dame, he said, I'm glad I didn't make the same mistake twice. That to me is all bulletin board material. I just think this defense, if I trust what they've done all season long, I trust the seniors, the majority of the people that came back with this goal in mind, I just don't have faith that Notre Dame's offense can score more than 17.
What do you got?
I have Ohio State 24.
Ooh, okay.
Notre Dame 10. Because I do genuinely,
24-10.
I do believe Notre Dame's defense is solid. And I think
whether or not it shows up in this game, this is a very good defense.
And I think they've shown bits and pieces. I mean, against Penn State, they let Singleton and Allen go for over 200 yards. I think that, and Drew Aller probably had some here and there, and Tyler Warren had some here and there, but they rushed for over 200 yards on the ground. And I think you saw it against Texas. Travion just needs a little bit of space, and he's gone. He's done at least one of those home run plays every game this playoffs. Judkins being in the backfield, his blocking has been underappreciated.
I agree.
He's been able to open up holes. The offensive line, despite a little bit of troubles against probably one of the best defensive lines in the nation, were able to still get it done. I mean, they won the rushing battle still overall. I think they only had 80-something yards, but they held Texas to 55 or 58 or something.
Yeah, the run game was not there for either team.
No. And so and Love has had a handful of games this year. I think during the playoffs, he's only had one game for 100 yards, and it was against Indiana.
Well,
other than that, he's struggled.
there's a question of health for him too, right?
Yeah, his ankle.
I mean, he's playing. I believe it's his knee, but
he was supposed to not hurdle as much, and he did like the next play.
So I mean, he'll be good to go. One of the big things. One of the big things for Notre Dame is, I mean, they are also banged up on offensive line, and I guess time will tell in about a week here whether or not they. I don't even know if I'd say that. I don't even know if I'd say that they have the depth of Ohio State, because I'm not sure Ohio State has the depth. But what the rotation has worked. I'll give them that. The rotation's worked.
Notre Dame's already been ruled out.
Yeah, the left starter. I
can't remember his name.
Forgive me, Irish fans. I can't remember his name, but starting left tackle has already been ruled out there. There's another guy on the line that's questionable. I mean, the odds are against Notre Dame in this one, and so Notre Dame's game plan, I would agree, is going to have to be winning the rushing battle. And that's where I would expect, and again, I'm not a football coach, but I would expect Jeremiah Love to be a factor. I'd expect Riley Leonard to be a factor. I would expect a lot of play action. You're gonna have to. But are you giving your guy, are you creating any space for these guys to run? Are you creating, if you run play action, are you creating enough time for him to find Mitchell Evans, or are you creating enough time to find Greathouse or whatever? Like, I don't know, because that Ohio State defensive line has been so good,
and that
Notre Dame offensive line, if they're banged up, now's not the time to be banged up.
And that whole defense, I mean, if you want to, in this sport specifically, the seniority is everything. You saw it with Michigan last year.
Experience.
That's the strength of this Ohio State defense. If you look across the board, it's all 4th, 5th year guys that have been here. They've played in big games. You've seen how they've played throughout these playoffs. The defensive line honestly played very well all game long against Texas.
Yeah, they did.
The linebackers have been good. Sonny Styles has been on a tear. Cody Simon has been phenomenal. Him and JTT had a couple of small injuries. They still played through it.
Yeah.
But
which JTT, sorry to interrupt you there. JTT will be one to keep an eye on. He's going to play. By all indications, he's going to play. How healthy is he?
Yeah, and having that week to kind of recover from all that stuff will be
huge.
Will be huge for them. But that's this Ohio State defense all across the board is experience.
Yeah,
and so I just, when it comes down to it, I trust the Ohio State offense. You've seen the powerhouse that they can be. Even if the run game isn't 100% working, if you're going to play man, that passing game is going to be there. You're going to not switching to a zone like you saw Texas or Michigan do. It's not going to help you. That the passing game is still going to be there for the Buckeyes. But if I'm thinking defense versus defense, I know it's number 1 versus number 2. I've seen it time and time again from Ohio State, the bend don't break attitude. And I've not really seen it from Notre Dame as far on the offensive side to be able to really go out there against elite competition and get it done.
Yeah. If you're Notre Dame, and I'll give you my prediction here. I mean, this feels this feels very similar. They're different teams. They're very different teams, but it feels very similar to the Michigan game plan. Like if you want to beat Ohio State, here's a team with, I mean, a better offense than Michigan, let's be honest. But like, here's a team with an okay offense, let's call it average, an average offense and a really good defense. So the analogy that I'd use for leading into the Michigan-Ohio State game for weeks was the path is filled with razor wire and poison ivy, but it's there. And it's really the same game plan. Is you're going to have to get a, I don't know, 3+ sacks or at least a ton of pressure on Howard. Mm-hmm. You're going to need 2+2 in the turnover department, and you're going to have to run for like 150+ yards. I mean, I think that's it. You need you need to get home 3 times against Howard, because that indicates to me also that you're pressuring him quite a bit. You got to get home 2 or 3 times, let's say. You need to be not just 2 turnovers, plus 2 turnovers, and you're going to have to run for at least 150. If you do that, then sure. Then I think Notre Dame can pull it out. I don't have faith, as good as this defense is, as good as they are at creating turnovers. Marcus Freeman will have him ready to go. I cannot pick Notre Dame in this game in good faith. And what makes me want to vomit to pick Ohio State, but like my job is to try to predict what I think is going to happen. I've got Ohio State 34-17.
Okay.
So I think Ohio State actually is able to break through this defense because of that man coverage issue. I just think that the talent matchup is just too heavy in Ohio State's favor. I think Notre Dame finds the end zone a couple times, but I feel like by the time you get to the third quarter, middle of the third quarter, I see Ohio State breaking this open if it's not already open.
Yeah, to me, this is a game that could be out of hand pretty quick.
Listen, from what I've seen of the playoff, this game could be out of hand in the first quarter. Like that's one of the things about the Texas game is like it was 14-7 or it was 7-0. It was 7-0 Ohio State like late in that second quarter, and my thought was, well, I'm not impressed with Texas's offense, but it could be 34-0 right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I guess that's good. Yeah, Notre Dame is gonna, God bless you. May Lou Holtz work whatever magic he's got.
It's one of those weird things where like
you're gonna need help.
I'm looking at this and it sounds incredibly cocky, but I think a lot of people would agree with this. Ohio State to win this just has to go out and be themselves. Notre Dame almost
100%.
has to play a near perfect game.
Well, you've got to. I agree. You've got to again to go back to Michigan. Like you've got to muddy it up, and by that I don't mean playing dirtier penalties. I mean like. You need to turn this into a slog.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Michigan was able to do against Ohio State. I mean, the analogy was used. This isn't mine. The analogy was used of, hey, let's lure Ohio State into a phone booth and get into a boxing match there. And Ohio State said, okay, that's Michigan's game plan. Mm-hmm. That's what they needed. That's what this version of the Michigan team could do, and they got Ohio State to bite on it. Notre Dame's going to have to do the same thing. Take the ball away, limit opportunities, and go on those 6, 7, 8 minute drives. So, they're going to have to, if they don't do it, it's a nigh impossible task. It's not impossible because we saw it in Columbus in November, but it's a really tall task. And if they can't do that, again, 2 or 3 sacks, plus 2 turnovers, 150 rush. If you can't do that, you're not going to win this game.
The one final thing, it was another one of our wheel routes we didn't get to, but it feels like a good way to close this off. Talking specifically, obviously, about the national championship game, which player in your mind needs to have the biggest impact for their team? And this can be Buckeye, it can be Notre Dame. You could do both if you want to. What player needs to have the most impact for them to be successful?
I mean, it has to be Riley Leonard, right? Like, I mean, that feels like.
What do you think he needs to do to get it done?
I don't even know that I think that he has to have the stats. Like I said, offensively, 150 plus rushing yards from somebody collectively, whatever. But why I pick him is he's going to be the one who, by virtue of the passing game, is going to open up a little bit more run game. He is naturally, as a rushing quarterback, he's going to have to be able to find some plays with his legs, and he's going to have to take care of the football. Like, it's real low hanging analysis stuff.
Yeah.
But for Notre Dame to have a shot in this game, if Leonard is just, I mean, if he's pulling a Quinn Ewers and he's just stepping into the sack, which, okay, Arch Manning not being on the field makes no sense. Whatever, that's fine. Like if he just has no pocket presence,
mm-hmm.
it's over. If he just gets willy-nilly with the football, which I'm afraid he's going to, it's over. Like Ohio State's defense is too good for that. His play style
kind of leans more into the favor of the Ohio State defense in my mind, because you're not terribly afraid of his arm. So you're not going to have your secondary, your linebackers kind of out there providing help on a receiver. You're going to have your safeties doing that, and you're going to allow your linebackers the ability to blitz more often. You're going to see, in my mind, treat him extremely similar to how you saw Ohio State play Curtis Rourke, where you're going to go in, you've got a guy that can make plays on his feet. His arm doesn't necessarily scare you.
You're going to say, we can get home.
And you're going to go with different blitz packages that involve maybe every once in a while a Caleb Downs or Lathan Ransom, because you're going to trust your guys in Hancock, Jermaine Matthews. You're going to have Denzel Burke out there that are all, you're going to trust them in one-on-one situations every now and then so that you can send some speed in there. You're going to do some different blitz gaps where you can have a Cody Simon or Sonny Styles kind of blitz through off the block.
And he's going to have to be able to read that. And the play calling is going to have to match with it. You're going to probably have to do some of those, they talked a lot about the Sark screens, right, on the broadcast. You're going to have to be able to utilize a lot of that because he's going to have to get the ball out quick. He's going to have to be able to get it out safely. And that's where, again, if you can do that, that's where you can go on those 6, 7, 8 minute drives, right? Because you're not necessarily taking those big, deep shots downfield. By the way, if you want to, Igbinosun still plays. So like that would be the guy to target. But I think it lands on Riley Leonard. Even if he does all the things, unless you check all three boxes I've given you, I just don't think Notre Dame's got enough.
Ohio State side, who do you have from that team needs to be the most effective player on the field?
Man, I mean, probably goes back to the quarterback position too, right? It probably goes back to Will. I mean, if you've got Notre Dame playing man coverage, you've got Jeremiah down there and he's open, you better hit him. If you're getting pressured, you better be able to either throw the ball away safely or scramble it. Like, you better take care of the football. And one of the things that I've noticed with Will, because I watched in the Michigan game, is the entire Michigan game, he looked rattled.
Mm-hmm.
He threw 2 terrible interceptions. And even on the very last drive where Ohio State was going to had a chance to go win the game tie or win the game. I mean, he looked terrible. Absolutely just like was not seeing the field. And I saw glimpses of that in the Texas game where it was like, he's not seeing the field. And then there were other moments where he was seeing it perfectly. So he's going to have to be consistent. He's going to have to be calm. And you nailed it. Ohio State just needs to go be themselves. They don't need a superhuman effort from Howard. They need him to be clean. They need him to be efficient.
Yeah, you don't need Jeremiah Smith going off for 180 something yards. None of that.
But Will's got to take care of the football. He's not going to be able to turn it. He can't force it. He can't turn it over. I mean, Texas had the big hit down was it late third quarter where Howard actually fumbles? I didn't see it until after on the replay. Actually fumbled the football back into himself.
How he got that ball back is insane.
You know, and so stuff like that where it's like he's got to protect the football. He doesn't have to be superhuman. I think quarterback position is going to be, I mean, again, it's low hanging analysis, but it's going to be crucial in this game because if Ohio State loses this game, it's because, again, pressure, sacks on Howard, and turnovers that I'm imagining primarily come from him trying to force the ball or not seeing a guy. Xavier Watts is back there and he's just lobbing balls up to him. You know, like that's how you're going to lose games like that. That's how Penn State lost the game because Drew Allers just noodle arming stuff left and right. Okay.
Terrible. I don't think that's bad analysis. Like what you said, I think for me, it comes down to both sides of the ball and running backs. I think Jeremiah Love has got to be effective. If he's able to get the ground game going for them, it's going to open it up for Riley Leonard, and that's going to help prove your point. On the other end, I think if you're Henderson, you've got to be able to just do more outside of those big plays. I know every game this playoff, he's had one that's ripped off for 60-plus yards that has been incredible, but it's got to be more consistent. I think him and Judkins, both in Texas, I think Henderson had like 40-something yards on 7 touches. Judkins was like 6 touches for 30-something. You need one of them to go for over 100. You need to have at least over 150 rushing yards. Control the ground game. Whoever does that, like I already said, they will win the day. They'll be the ones holding the trophy at the end.
Notre Dame has got to. This is the same analysis that was given about Texas, so I'm going to rip it off and pretend it's my own. Notre Dame's got to survive the first 15. If you can survive the first 15 minutes, you're fine. You might still lose the game. And I'm not convinced that you still won't lose at 34-17. But if you can survive that first 15 minutes and get everybody settled in there, okay. If you can't, which is, you know, when Ohio State marched down the field and scored right off the bat on Texas, I went, oh no, oh no. You know, but they settled in, they survived it. Didn't change the outcome, but they settled in, they got themselves a ball game. Notre Dame needs absolutely this. Again, it's the same thing I said for Michigan. Notre Dame needs absolutely everything to go right, and it still might not be enough. But let Michigan remind you that maybe it will be. And that's the beauty of college football is you don't play it in the X's and O's. You play it on the field for 60 minutes, and it should be a ton of fun. Not for me, but for other people. Other people will have a lot of fun.
I'll be there. Hopefully we get credentialed. We're able to be there on the field. Well, I'll be able to be there.
I'm going to check live. I'm going to check live right now. Monday morning.
Fingers crossed.
Monday morning, 10:07.
Come on, baby.
I don't have anything yet.
Oh, dang.
That would have been so cool. Anyway, if you want to support the podcast, support rivalpod.com. Click the tab. Be sure to subscribe, by the way, on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to your podcast right now through the Varsity Network app, your favorite podcast app, wherever. And be sure to follow on social media as well at RivalPod. We'll see you next week.
Go Bucks.
The Rivalry is a production of River Radio Ministries. Want live updates from the show? Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RivalPod. To learn how to support the show, shop our merch, and read our blogs, visit rivalpod.com. Make sure to follow us wherever you're listening now. And if you like what you're hearing, tell a friend so they can listen too.